Eva's passion for dancing was catered for by mechanically lifting the auditorium floor to stage level, thus allowing Adelina to waltz with her friends far into the night. She would sing to the high and the humble providing they loved music and understood its meaning. Time passed and Niccolini's health began to fail and sea and air was prescribed. He stayed at Langland Bay on the Gower coast for a while and then travelled to Pau in southeast France, where he died in January 1898. The death of Niccolini wrought great change in the life of Patti and her castle. She was 56 years old and was soon to meet Baron Rolf Cederström, a Swedish nobleman 26 years her junior. They were married in the Catholic Church at Brecon on the 25th of January 1899 and returned to Craigernose. Her engagements were becoming rare and her last professional appearance took place in 1900, when she sang in a charitable performance of Romeo and Juliet at Covent Garden. Although her stage performance had come to an end, Baroness Cederström satisfied her need to sing through private performances in her beautiful and well-equipped theatre. An exciting event in her later years was the sound of her singing voice as she listened to a newly cut wax impression of an early gramophone record. It had been the ambition of all talking machine companies to record the great soprano, but for many years she had refused to sing for them. The phonograph had been replaced by an infant gramophone, which the diva considered a mere toy and unable to produce the true quality of her voice. Madame Patti was approaching 63 when the music world finally persuaded her to face the recording machine and sing for posterity. It was agreed that a recording team should travel to the castle, and in 1906 they arrived at the castle and installed their equipment in the theatre. The diva was kind and generous but somewhat temperamental, calling everyone darling or devil as the mood dictated. Very devout, she was said to be the singer with a flawless voice and personality to match. Each session lasted about an hour, and the whole recording took 4 days to complete. She found it difficult to remain still when singing into the machine's small funnel, and was gently restrained from moving to the demands of the music. Initially she was quite nervous and after the first recording asked to hear it immediately. Although this would spoil the work, her wish was granted and the piece recorded once again. With the sound of her voice the great soprano finally shared an experience that had captivated audiences around the globe. Although praying before each recording, she felt reassured and faced the remainder with less foreboding. Shortly after completing her repertoire, the recording team hid the gramophone near the main staircase, and as the Baroness descended to dinner the air was filled with the sound of her voice. She is said to have remained still and very pale, clinging to the banisters throughout. Although in the twilight of her glorious career, her voice rang true and was professionally superb. Unfortunately, Patti recorded no more, but her voice and technique overcame the shortcomings of that early equipment and produced a quality of sound that sped the gramophone into the homes of many. A glorious career was drawing to its close, and new technology paid tribute to a remarkable lady. The diva made her last public appearance in October 1914 when she sang for the Red Cross, and, once again, filled the Albert Hall with an adoring public that loved her still. Her life of travel was almost through, and she came to spend the greater part of the years at the castle with her husband and devoted staff. Her theatre remains a time capsule, and the stage is probably the only surviving example of original 19th century backstage equipment. The sound of her recordings within the auditorium can often affect the people who hear it. The Great War touched upon life at the castle when the French chef and the son of Madame's personal maid went to war and were killed in the trenches. Among her staff were 2 German pantry boys and a German laundry girl, all of whom were interned when the war began. But love found a way when the laundry girl married a local boy and was released immediately. The Winter Garden was another architectural feature to be built for the Baroness at the end of the 19th century. A spacious building with a soaring roof and made mainly from glass, this was where the diva would promenade with her guests among tropical plants whilst exotic birds flew within. A pair of iron fountains fashioned as cranes with multicolored plumage shed rainbow light from their falling waters and captivated all who saw them. Once again, time and the war brought change to the castle, and in 1918 the prima donna presented her winter garden to the people of Swansea, where it became the Patty Pavilion and has been restored. One of the fountains stands in the forecourt of the castle and the other is said to exist in the grounds of Swansea University. When the contractors arrived to dismantle the winter garden, they were told that all able-bodied men had gone to war and they would have to find an alternative labor force. The presence of this rich and famous personality affected the community in many ways and has been touched upon elsewhere. Probably of the most benefit to ordinary people was the amount of employment she created. At one time, 70 house servants and outside staff were engaged at the castle, then a main source of income for a small community living several miles from the collieries and iron works in the lower part of the valley. The cost of running the castle can be gauged from the 40 tons of coal supplied each month, most of which was used for domestic heating and horticulture, fluctuating according to season. The castle was the first private house to be wired for electricity, and evidence of this was found some years ago by Mr. J. Lee, the last hospital secretary, and someone from an electrical company engaged in relevant research. Power at 110 volts, DC, was generated by an auto gas engine which was fueled from a small gasworks situated in the grounds. The wiring consisted of planks with 2 parallel grooves that took a bare copper wire and covered with a corresponding piece of wood. This supplied power for swan lamps and an electrically powered orchestra organ which was controlled by a punched paper roll and situated in the billiard room. It was the pride and joy of Nicolini, thus dating it prior to his death in 1898. The diva remained at the castle during the twilight years of her life and music remained her first love. She would practice her scales daily, sometimes accompanied by her 3 parrots, one of which was 80 years old. Grand pianos graced many of the rooms, including the master bedroom and the theatre. Opera scores and manuscripts were to be found everywhere, and Adelina would often have one with her when discussing domestic matters. Sometimes she would misplace it and a servant would retrace the diva's steps until it was found. Baron Rolf von Sederstrom left Wales almost immediately after her death and was to survive her by almost 30 years. He remarried 4 years later and became the father of a daughter, dying in 1947 at Newmarket. Since her death, stories have been told of her benign presence being seen or felt over the years. The tiny figure of a lady dressed in black is said to have been seen gliding across different rooms and drifting around the courtyard. One recent story tells of a lady pianist who once sat at a piano in an anteroom of the theatre and then felt a presence behind her. At her first attempt she played the whole of Patty's Home Sweet Home perfectly, before turning round to find no one there. The castle and the grounds were sold to the Welsh National Memorial Trust for £11,000 in March 1921, and it was called the Adelina Patti Hospital at the request of the Baron. It functioned as a chest hospital and many of the patients were children. These would leave a legacy and became known as the Children of Craigernowes. Many died and some were nursed back to health during this period until the scourge of tuberculosis was conquered. In its latter years, the patients were mainly elderly and infirm. During the Second World War an RAF pilot was brought to the hospital for treatment and met a young woman who was almost confined to her bed. They decided to wed, but she was too ill to travel, so the church granted them a special dispensation. They were married in the theatre and returned to the outside world after recovering their health. The castle finally closed as a hospital on the 31st of March 1986 after the transfer of remaining patients to the new community hospital. The Welsh office maintained the castle and its unique theatre until it was sold into private ownership. Today it plays host to many people who travel from all over the world to stay at the castle and see the beauty of this time capsule. Thank you for listening.